In the world of the powerful, an insult is more than just words, it's a declaration of war. And no one in the luxurious coastal city of San Bellagio ever thought a simple waitress would be the one to fire the first shot. This night, the air in the private dining room of the Obsidian was thick with expensive cigar smoke and silent, dangerous promises. It was a yearly gathering, a handshake between the city's old money and its very necessary shadows. At the head of the long table sat Alessandro Moretti. He was young, impossibly rich, and everyone in the room knew he ran the show now. He had the hard, chiseled face of a marble statue, olive skin, and eyes so cold they looked like chips of grey ice. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that cost more than a small car. Alessandro never smiled, and his voice, when he used it, cut through the noise like a razor. The moment the world stopped turning came when a silver tray slipped. It wasn't a crash, just a heavy, sickening thud as a bottle of ancient, red wine tilted, staining the immaculate white marble floor and splashing the shoe of one of Alessandro's top enforcers, a hulking man named Silas. The waitress who had lost her grip was Serafina. Serafina was beautiful, but in a way that didn't demand attention. She had warm, mocha-brown skin that glowed even under the dim light, and her hair was a cascade of tight, glossy curls pulled back neatly. Her eyes, large and a striking amber color, were usually quick to smile, but right now they were wide with terror. She was wearing the standard, crisp white blouse and black skirt of the staff. She dropped to her knees immediately, grabbing a napkin. Silas, a man built like a concrete pillar, started to rise, his face turning beet red. But before he could speak, Alessandro's voice, slow and lethally quiet, cut across the room. "Stop," Alessandro commanded. He didn't look at the wine or Silas. He looked straight at Serafina. "Look at what your carelessness cost us. You are a clumsy, useless piece of trash. Get out of my sight, and go cry in the kitchen, where you belong, you cheap SL***T. The whole room went silent. Everyone tensed, waiting for the expected tears, the trembling apology, the hurried scramble away. But Serafina didn't tremble. She didn't cry. She slowly stood up, wiping her hands on her apron. Her amber eyes met Alessandro's cold grey ones, and a small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, a smile that held the icy confidence of someone who knows exactly what to do next. "I apologize for the wine, Mr. Moretti," Serafina said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the silence. "But I see the cost of carelessness on the floor is nothing compared to the cost of your father's carelessness in Monte Carlo last year. That cost him almost 40 million euros, didn't it? I hear the bank is still asking questions about that secret Swiss account." The room exploded in a rush of nervous coughs and sudden, desperate silence. Alessandro's grey eyes widened just for a second, a tiny crack in the marble statue. The name of the city and the number 40 million were things no one in that room should have known. The man who had been so secure in his power 2 seconds ago suddenly looked like a boy caught stealing. That was the moment the balance shifted. The powerful Mafia boss had been humiliated by a waitress, and this was only the start. For Serafina, the night had been a struggle from the moment she walked into the Obsidian. She needed the money badly. Her little sister, Clara, a fragile teenager with pale skin and light blonde hair often pulled back in a messy bun, was recovering from a nasty fever back in their cramped apartment above a noisy bakery. Every hour Serafina worked was another bottle of medicine, another doctor's bill paid. The clientele at the Obsidian was always rough around the edges, but Alessandro Moretti's table was different. It felt heavy, like sitting next to a dormant volcano. Serafina tried to be invisible, sticking to the shadows, but the air around them felt demanding. Alessandro had inherited his position, not from his father, who was still technically alive but sidelined by a sudden, mysterious illness, but by sheer will and ruthlessness. He treated the staff like air or dirt, depending on his mood. Tonight, his mood was poisonous. He was arguing with Silas, the massive enforcer, about a piece of property in the city's industrial zone. Silas, despite his size, was completely subservient. There was another man at the table, Vincenzo, a much older man with a thin, sharp face and constantly twitching hands. He was the one who handled the books, the one who knew every number. Vincenzo never spoke unless spoken to, But Serafina noticed his eyes, dark and constantly moving, taking in every detail of the room. The argument grew louder, and Serafina, focused on delivering a new tray of chilled glasses, was trying to slip past. That's when the tray caught the edge of the heavy oak chair as Silas shifted. The wine went over, and the world came crashing down. When Alessandro threw the insult, Serafina felt the familiar sting of humiliation, the kind she'd learned to swallow over years of scraping by. But then, a red-hot wave of anger washed over her. It wasn't just about her. It was about every time someone like Alessandro treated the hard-working people of the city as disposable objects. And then, the moment of clarity hit her. Just last week, while covering a shift in the back office, she'd overheard Vincenzo on a hushed phone call. He was frantic, mentioning a massive transfer, an overseas bank, and the name of a distant, high-rolling coastal city. Serafina wasn't a spy, but she had a gift for remembering numbers and names, a kind of photographic memory that was usually only good for acing exams back in school. The details clicked into place. Monte Carlo, the Swiss account, the 40 million. It was a specific, damaging piece of family information that was meant to be secret. She knew that exposing this would do far more damage than any shattered wine bottle. The room was still reeling from her quiet declaration. Alessandro stared at her, his usual mask of cold indifference shattered. For the first time tonight, she saw a flicker of raw danger in his eyes, a kind of primal fury. "What did you say?" Alessandro asked, his voice now a low rumble that felt like the floor vibrating. "Who the hell are you?" Serafina didn't take a step back. She held his gaze. "I am the person who just cleaned your floor, Mr. Moretti. I am also the person who believes that sometimes, when you look down on people, you miss the important details happening right beneath your nose." Silas finally found his voice. "Boss, let me handle this piece of..." Alessandro raised a hand, stopping Silas cold. He was calculating now, trying to figure out if she was a threat, a spy, or just a random, lucky guesser. His eyes narrowed. "You have exactly 5 seconds to tell me where you heard that information," he demanded. "Or the floor won't be the only thing getting cleaned up tonight." Serafina knew she had gone too far to retreat. She needed a safe exit. She took a calming breath, remembering Clara's weak smile. "You should ask Vincenzo, Mr. Moretti," she said, not yelling, just stating a fact. "He looks very uncomfortable right now. Perhaps he can explain the difference between a messy floor and a messy ledger." Vincenzo visibly recoiled, dropping his fork with a sharp clink. All eyes snapped to him. The betrayal wasn't about Serafina. It was the possibility that someone at the table was loose-lipped. This time, Alessandro didn't waste his time on Serafina. He pivoted, his cold grey eyes locking onto Vincenzo, his fury now channeled, deadly, and precise. Serafina realized she had done exactly what she intended, shifted the target. "Vincenzo," Alessandro said, his voice deadly calm. "Did you have a problem with discretion?" Vincenzo started stammering, his hands shaking violently. "No, sir. Never. It was a mistake, an old conversation, a lapse." Serafina used the diversion. She placed the soiled napkin on the wine-stained floor, gave one last, chillingly confident look to Alessandro. A look that said, "This isn't over," and walked calmly toward the kitchen door. Just as she reached the door, Alessandro spoke, his voice now a quiet, chilling promise. "Serafina," he said, using her name for the first time. She paused, her hand on the cold steel of the handle. "You just bought yourself a ticket to a game you don't know how to play. You should have just cried." She pushed the door open, slipping into the noisy, safe chaos of the kitchen before answering. Her voice was too low for anyone in the dining room to hear, but she said it anyway, a vow to herself. "I never cry for men who break things, Mr. Moretti. I fix them. Or I break them back." She ran straight out the back exit, the adrenaline pumping in her veins. She knew she was fired, but the fear was overshadowed by a reckless, exhilarating sense of accomplishment. She'd stood up to the monster, and for a terrifying moment, the monster had flinched. But as she hurried down the dark alleyway toward the tram stop, the realization hit her. Alessandro Moretti wasn't a man who flinched and forgot. He was a man who planned his revenge slowly, methodically, and absolutely. She had humiliated him in front of his crew, and that was a debt that could only be paid in blood, or worse, obsession. She had exposed his biggest weakness, and now she was his biggest weakness. Serafina stepped onto the tram, trying to calm her racing heart. She pulled out her small, worn phone to check on Clara. A message popped up, but it wasn't from her sister. It was from an unknown number. The message was short, anonymous, and terrifying. "Your sister, Clara. She just coughed blood. Get home now. You won't be able to protect her from your new enemies much longer." The air rushed out of Serafina's lungs. She dropped her phone, the screen cracking on the tram floor. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The shame of Alessandro's insult was gone, replaced by a cold, immediate panic. He hadn't sent his men after her. He had gone straight for the one person she loved and needed to protect most in the world. The game had just begun, and the price was already too high. Wow! Just like that, Serafina is in a dangerous war she never asked for. If you are already hooked and want to see how she saves her sister and manages to stand up to a man like Alessandro, make sure you smash that like button right now. Also, we want to know where you are watching this thrilling start. Comment below and tell us what city you are tuning in from. And if you want to be here for the entire epic story, the heartbreak, the betrayal, and the redemption, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single episode. Reputation is everything in the dark corners of San Bellagio. It's the shield that keeps the bullets away. And in a single, quiet sentence, Serafina had cracked Alessandro Moretti's shield right down the middle. The moment the kitchen door swung shut behind Serafina, a wave of nervous energy washed over the private dining room. The silence was heavier than before, but this time it was broken by a sound that truly infuriated Alessandro. A strained, choking laugh from one of his lower-ranking men. The sound was quickly cut short by a brutal elbow to the ribs, but the damage was done. Alessandro didn't yell. He didn't flip the table. He simply stood up, slowly. His olive skin, normally smooth, looked tight and strained. He looked at the man who had laughed, a young kid named Marco, and then he looked at Silas, the enforcer who was supposed to be his rock. "Did you find that funny, Marco?" Alessandro asked, his cold grey eyes fixing on the terrified young man. Marco shook his head desperately, sputtering out apologies. Alessandro ignored him and turned to Vincenzo, the old bookkeeper with the sharp, panicked face. 40 million euros, Vincenzo?" he asked, his voice softer than before, which only made it more terrifying. "An old mistake in Monte Carlo. Why does a waitress know something I have to pay men millions to keep silent?" Vincenzo's hands, which were always twitching, were now shaking so badly he couldn't lift his wine glass. "It was nothing, Alessandro. A rumor, a lie. She's lying. The bank in Geneva is solid. The account is hidden. She knows nothing." But everyone in the room saw it. Serafina's accuracy. She hadn't guessed. She had known. The waitress had publicly proven that Alessandro's inner circle was compromised, and his enemies would be hearing this story before sunrise. Alessandro walked to the end of the table, running a perfectly manicured finger over the wet wine stain Serafina had left. "I don't care if she knows nothing," he whispered, a sound of pure venom. "She embarrassed me. In front of you. That is unacceptable. She will regret the moment she chose to be brave." He looked up, his grey eyes burning with a singular, terrifying focus. "Find her, Silas. Find her sister. I want every movement, every friend, every breath she takes. I want her world to fall apart so quietly that she doesn't realize she's in hell until she's already there. No one touches my name and walks away. No one." This wasn't just revenge, it was the birth of an obsession, a promise of total destruction against the only person who had ever made the great Alessandro Moretti look weak. The meeting broke up quickly after that. The air was too toxic, too volatile. Alessandro gave a quick, sharp command to Silas to handle Vincenzo, which everyone knew meant he was about to disappear, and then headed toward the exit. But he was intercepted in the narrow, marble-tiled hallway by the restaurant's owner, Mr. Bellini. Bellini was a short, heavyset man, his face a roadmap of wrinkles that usually seemed kind and tired. He had thin, perfectly styled silver hair combed neatly back and wore an immaculate grey tuxedo that looked expensive but uncomfortable. His eyes, though gentle, held a deep, unexpected knowledge. Bellini spoke quietly, close enough so only Alessandro could hear, the volume of the kitchen noise masking his words. "Alessandro," Bellini said, a note of weariness in his voice. "A word. About the girl. Serafina." Alessandro stopped, his entire body tense. "She is no concern of yours, Bellini. She made a mistake. I will correct it." Bellini sighed, running a hand over his face. "Your father taught you better than that, boy. Serafina is a mistake you don't want to correct. Leave her alone." Alessandro scoffed. "Are you protecting your staff? That clumsy SL***T. She's an inconvenience. I will eliminate the inconvenience." "She is not an inconvenience," Bellini insisted, his gentle eyes now firm. "She is protected. You won't find out who by. You won't find out why. All you need to know is that if you touch a hair on her head, or that little sister of hers, the consequences will be immediate, and they will be greater than 40 million euros. Your father's illness will look like a vacation." This was a threat Bellini had no business making. Bellini was the quiet caretaker of a luxury establishment, not a power player. Alessandro leaned down, bringing his hard, chiseled face close to the older man's ear. "You think you can warn me, Bellini? You think you hold enough power in this city to stand in my way?" Bellini didn't flinch. "I don't think it, Alessandro. I know it. You are powerful, but you are not the only one. There are rules, and Serafina is currently under one of them. Find another enemy. This girl is off limits. Trust me, you don't want to meet the people who make these rules." Alessandro straightened up, his grey eyes narrowed in confusion and rage. The owner of a restaurant was telling the Mafia boss he couldn't have his revenge. The lack of fear in Bellini's eyes was the most confusing part. Alessandro had always assumed power was visible, but this was a quiet, invisible authority he couldn't place. "Who are you working for?" Alessandro demanded. "Tell me now, Bellini." Bellini simply stepped back, his face returning to its familiar, tired kindness. "I am working for the house, Alessandro. And tonight, the house says, leave Serafina alone." He paused, then added, his voice barely a breath, "It is already too late for the 40 million, don't let it be too late for everything else." Bellini turned and vanished through a service door. Alessandro was left alone in the hallway, his mind reeling. The humiliation Serafina had caused was one thing. The mysterious, powerful warning from Bellini was something else entirely. It was a lock on the door of his revenge, and Alessandro hated locks. Alessandro ignored Bellini. Warnings were for the weak. He went straight to his fortified apartment overlooking the harbor, a sleek, modern fortress of glass and steel. He didn't even bother taking off his perfectly tailored suit. He sat down at a black glass desk, his mind moving a million miles an hour, not with rage, but with cold, calculating thought. He pulled out a customized phone and immediately called Silas, who was still dealing with the shaking Vincenzo. "I want that girl," Alessandro told Silas, his voice a flat command. "Forget Vincenzo for now. He's already broken. She's the problem. I want her full name, her background, her school records, where she lives. Everything." "Boss, Bellini was very serious," Silas cautioned, his voice strained. "He spoke with a weight I've never heard before. Maybe we should wait, check the wires." "You think I am afraid of a restaurant owner?" Alessandro snapped, the question laced with pure threat. "I am Alessandro Moretti. I decide who is protected. If you question me again, Silas, you can join Vincenzo. Now move." Silas went silent, a muffled yes, boss barely audible before the line clicked dead. Alessandro stared out at the dark, gleaming harbor. The problem wasn't the 40 million, that was recoverable. The problem was the crack in his reputation. The problem was that Serafina, the girl who smelled of cheap perfume and cleaning supplies, had seen a weakness in him that his own family couldn't find. That kind of intelligence wasn't random luck. And that kind of insolence required a focused, surgical response. He pulled up the message about the sister, Clara, that he had sent the moment Serafina humiliated him. That was his first move, leveraging her weakness. He knew the pain of losing a family member. It was the easiest way to break someone. He looked at the address Silas had quickly sent over, a run-down apartment building in the city's old quarter. The contrast was stark, him in a high-rise fortress, her in a crumbling tenement. The difference in their wealth was 1,000 to 1, but tonight, she felt like the one with the upper hand. Alessandro finally allowed himself a thin, wolfish smile. Bellini's warning, the humiliation, the mysterious secret, it had all turned Serafina into something interesting. Something to conquer. She wasn't just a mistake to eliminate, she was a challenge to own. He stood up, grabbing his tailored coat. The quiet, gentle warning from Mr. Bellini had only done one thing, made Serafina a prize, not just a problem. Alessandro was in the black sedan, speeding toward the old quarter, ready to observe Serafina's panic firsthand. As the car turned onto a dimly lit cobblestone street, his driver's phone rang. The driver glanced at the screen, then hesitated, his face turning pale. He lowered the volume, but Alessandro could still hear the low, static-filled voice on the other end. The driver quickly hung up and looked back at Alessandro, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. "Sir," the driver stammered, his voice trembling. That was a private security frequency. They just reported a blackout in the old quarter. Power is out for 3 square blocks, specifically, the 3 blocks around Serafina's address. It looks like a targeted shutdown, boss. And the call wasn't from our people. It came from Bellini's. Alessandro's grey eyes hardened. The restaurant owner hadn't just warned him, he had actively intervened to prevent him from reaching her. He was protecting her, and he was using power to do it. The game was more dangerous than Alessandro thought, and the prize was getting closer. "Turn around," Alessandro commanded, his voice cold as ice. "Go back to the apartment. If Bellini wants to play, we play his way. But first, Silas needs to find out who the hell Serafina is to be worth this kind of trouble. This stops being about revenge now. This is about power, and I will have my answers." The sedan spun around, leaving the dark, silent blocks of the old quarter behind. Serafina was safe for the moment, but only because a mysterious, powerful hand had reached out to protect her. And Alessandro knew that whatever was protecting her was something he had to either break or control. Serafina ran all the way home. The terrifying message about her sister, Clara, burned in her mind more fiercely than Alessandro's cold threat. When she burst into their small, cramped apartment, the first thing she did was rush to Clara's bedside. Clara, with her pale skin and light blonde hair fanned out on the pillow, was weak but breathing steadily. Serafina quickly checked her temperature. A bad fever, yes, but no blood. The message was a lie, a psychological weapon. Alessandro had played dirty, and Serafina felt the fear drain away, replaced by a cold, surgical clarity. She was Serafina Torres, the struggling waitress. But that was a disguise she had worn for 3 long years. The real her was someone else entirely. She walked over to the wall near the tiny stove, the paint peeling and the plaster cracked, and ran her hand over a section that looked exactly like the rest of the wall. She pushed a specific spot, and with a soft click, a small, hidden panel slid open. Inside, tucked away from the grime and noise of the city, was a piece of high-tech equipment, a worn laptop with enough computing power to run a small bank. Serafina sat down on the edge of the cheap mattress and pulled the laptop close. Her hands, which had trembled in the private dining room, were now steady and focused. She opened the machine, navigating quickly through layers of protective programs that looked like complicated riddles. She wasn't opening her social media, she was opening the forbidden books. She found what she was looking for, a dense, scrolling list of numbers and names. This wasn't just bank information. This was the digital ledger of sins, the untouchable records of every illicit transaction, every bribe, and every hidden asset belonging to the most powerful families in the city. The technical term for it was encrypted financial data, but for Serafina, it was the only inheritance she had left. Her face, with its luminous mocha-brown skin, was illuminated by the green glow of the screen. She found the name, Moretti. And there, under his profile, was the recent history of that old mistake in Monte Carlo. 40 million euros, shifted under extreme pressure. She hadn't guessed that night. She had simply read the ledger. And that proved one terrifying truth. Alessandro Moretti was weak, and she held the key to his destruction. She smiled, a cold, calculated expression that didn't reach her bright amber eyes. The real question wasn't if she would strike, but who she was truly waiting for. Alessandro was a child playing in his father's shoes, but Serafina was hunting a giant. And the giant was about to step into her trap. For 3 years, Serafina had lived as the ghost of her former self. Her real name was Ilara Cassini. The Cassini name had once held serious weight in the financial world, specializing not in moving dirty money, but in quietly tracing and exposing it. They were a financial intelligence syndicate that worked outside the law, dedicated to bringing down the biggest, dirtiest powers. Ilara, or Serafina, was the only one left. Her family, the true Cassini syndicate, had vanished in a flash years ago. One day they were a powerful force, the next they were gone, erased without a trace, leaving Ilara only with the digital ledger of sins and a lifetime of training on how to use it. She knew they hadn't been defeated by Alessandro. They had been taken down by someone far older, far more entrenched, and far more powerful. Her time in San Bellagio wasn't accidental. She had been tracking one specific target, the shadowy man who ordered the elimination of her family. She had taken the simple waitress job at the Obsidian because it was a perfect observation post. It was where the powerful gathered, where they talked too loudly after their third expensive drink, and where Ilara could silently gather the final, key piece of information she needed to initiate her strike. She clicked on a profile in the ledger, a name even older and more imposing than Moretti, a name associated with judges, politicians, and the city's deep foundation. The name was Silvio Falcone. He was the monster, the one she had promised herself she would destroy. Alessandro was just a loud, annoying mosquito buzzing around the true prey. "Soon, Papa," she whispered, running her finger over the name Falcone on the screen. "I will have him. You didn't die for nothing." But now, Alessandro Moretti had forced her hand. The moment he threatened Clara, the game changed from a long-term vendetta into immediate survival. She had to deal with the mosquito before it brought the giant to her doorstep. She started to quickly delete her recent activity logs, scrubbing the digital dust trails that led back to her apartment. Her mind worked faster than any computer, calculating risk against reward. She thought about Mr. Bellini, the restaurant owner. His quiet, immediate intervention, the blackout at her address, was a clear sign of extreme, unseen power. Who was Bellini? He was too quiet, too knowledgeable, and definitely too gentle to be part of the main syndicate. Could he be an old friend of her father's? An invisible guardian? The puzzle pieces didn't fit, but his move had saved Clara from the initial panic, buying Serafina precious time. Up in his glass fortress, Alessandro Moretti was pacing like a caged tiger. Silas, the massive enforcer with a face like concrete, stood silently, holding a handful of documents, Serafina's fake identity papers. "Serafina Torres," Silas reported, his voice heavy. "It's a clean slate, boss. A birth certificate, a high school diploma, a work permit, all perfectly legal. But there's nothing before 3 years ago. She's a ghost, she appeared out of nowhere." Alessandro scoffed, looking at the city lights far below him. "Of course, she is a ghost. A waitress does not publicly expose my family's financial crisis unless she's been looking for it. She is a tool, Silas. Someone else sent her." "Bellini is not talking, boss," Silas admitted. "He claims he acted on his own initiative to protect the integrity of his establishment. He's lying." Alessandro stopped pacing. "Bellini is the key. But if we try to squeeze him, the people protecting him will move. We need to hit Serafina, but in a way that is quiet, non-violent, and untouchable, a way that Bellini's hidden friends can't trace back to a physical threat. He picked up a heavy glass paperweight and looked at the documents again. She hit my reputation. I will hit her where it hurts the most. Financial ruin. Dig into her fake records, Silas. Find her bank account. Find where she keeps her money. We will freeze it, erase it, and leave her completely stranded. She won't even be able to buy Clara a new bottle of medicine. Then, she will come crawling to me. Meanwhile, Serafina was still hunched over her glowing screen. She had watched the digital chatter, tracking the subtle increase in network surveillance aimed at her address. She knew Alessandro was coming for her, not with guns, but with accountants and lawyers. He was trying to financially suffocate her. Clara needs medicine, and I need time, Serafina murmured to herself. Her original mission to strike Falcone had to wait. Survival now depended on turning the tables on Alessandro immediately. She realized Alessandro would go after the only bank account he knew, the one linked to the name Serafina Torres. It only had a few €1,000, barely enough to cover a month's rent. But it was a trap. For 3 years, Serafina had been working quietly, not as a waitress, but as a digital security consultant for small, honest businesses. Her real earnings were not in a bank account. They were in untraceable digital currency, stored safely behind the layers of her ledger of sins. But she was ready to use one of her most dangerous, hidden tools. She opened a small, complex program on her laptop. The technical name was a dynamic firewall, but she called it the Worm. The Worm's entire purpose was to lie in wait, waiting for someone to try and access her finances. If an unauthorized attempt was made, the Worm wouldn't just block it. It would instantly trace the origin of the attack and fire back. Serafina began coding furiously, building a digital bridge between her small, fake bank account and the Moretti family's online holding company. It was like running a small, invisible wire from a tiny light bulb straight into a massive power grid. He will try to freeze my few euros, she thought, her amber eyes reflecting the green screen. But when he does, the Worm will trace his digital signature back to his corporate vault. And then, it will take something much bigger than 40 million euros as collateral. This time, I will teach him about the true price of carelessness. It was almost 4 a.m. Serafina had set the trap and was watching the screen, waiting for Alessandro to take the bait. She was exhausted, but alert. Suddenly, a small, blinking cursor appeared on her screen. An unknown digital entity had located her fake bank account. The attack was minutes away. Just then, the door to the small apartment creaked open. Serafina froze, instantly closing the laptop. She hadn't heard the door rattle, hadn't heard a lock turn. Someone was inside. A figure, tall and imposing, stepped out of the darkness of the narrow hallway. It wasn't Alessandro. It wasn't Silas. It was Mr. Bellini, the owner of the Obsidian, still wearing his expensive grey tuxedo, but his face was now serious, the gentle kindness replaced by a look of stern, worried authority. He looked at the dark silhouette of the laptop on the small mattress, then at Serafina's terrified face. He hadn't come for revenge, he had come for a meeting. And his first words were the most shocking thing Serafina had heard all night. Elara, Bellini said, using her real name, the name she hadn't heard spoken aloud in 3 long years. We need to talk. Your father didn't send me here just to save your life. He sent me to stop you from starting a war you can't win. Serafina's jaw dropped. Her long-lost father was somehow connected to this mysterious protector. The mystery had just become personal, and the entire premise of her revenge was about to be shattered. When a powerful man is insulted, his first instinct is to crush the source of the injury. But Alessandro Moretti was smarter than most powerful men. When he failed to find Serafina right away, and when the mysterious Mr. Bellini stepped in with a power outage to block him, Alessandro stopped chasing the insult. He started chasing the mystery. He was back in his high-rise apartment. The city lights of San Bellagio gleamed below, but Alessandro, with his olive skin and sharp, chiseled features, wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at a frozen image on a massive wall screen. The image was of Serafina, caught by a security camera in the hallway of the Obsidian restaurant just minutes before the wine incident. Silas, the massive enforcer, stood nearby, silently furious that they were wasting time on a waitress while their financial stability was being questioned. Alessandro's cold grey eyes, however, were glued to the screen. "She should be shaking," Alessandro murmured, talking more to himself than to Silas. She was surrounded by 5 dangerous men, including me, her boss. She just ruined a vintage bottle and she was called a terrible name. A normal girl cries, apologizes, or runs. He used a remote to play the security camera video in slow motion. He watched Serafina, her beautiful mocha-brown skin luminous even under the harsh fluorescent light, moving with a silent efficiency as she cleared a table. Her coiled dark hair was pulled back neatly, showing the sharp focus in her bright amber eyes. He saw her bend down to pick up a dropped napkin. Her movement wasn't clumsy, it was controlled. He watched her interact briefly with another waiter, a quiet nod, a brief, professional exchange. She was calm. She was too calm. "Look at her shoulders, Silas," Alessandro commanded. "Even when she's carrying a heavy tray, her posture is perfect. There's no strain, no panic. She doesn't have the posture of a girl who works 2 minimum wage jobs just to survive. She moves like a dancer, or a soldier." The initial impulse to simply eliminate her was gone, replaced by a deep, intellectual curiosity. Alessandro realized he had insulted something far more valuable and dangerous than a simple waitress. He had insulted a lie. And he desperately needed to know what truth lay beneath it. The revenge could wait, the answer couldn't. The next day, Alessandro ignored all his planned meetings, something that hadn't happened since he took over the family business. He ordered Silas to bring in 4 staff members from the Obsidian, the kitchen manager, 2 busboys, and a server who had worked closely with Serafina. The interviews took place in a windowless room in the back of his headquarters. The staff members were terrified, sweating under the simple white lights. They all gave the exact same account of Serafina Torres. She was quiet, the server, a young man named Fabio, stammered. Always on time. Never talked about her life. Always asked for extra shifts, especially the late ones. She was saving money for her sick sister, Clara. Did she have any visitors? Any strange calls? Did she ever ask about the Moretti family? Alessandro pressed, his voice even and relentless. "No, sir. Never," Fabio insisted, clutching his hands tightly. "She just worked. She was kind, always giving the busboys her tips if they helped her out. She never caused trouble. She was like a mouse, always in the shadows." Alessandro dismissed them, his frustration growing. He had spent his life dealing with people, the greedy, the scared, the ambitious. Everyone had a weakness, a desire that could be exploited. But Serafina Torres had built a wall around herself made of perfect, boring consistency. He turned to Silas. "She's too perfect, Silas. The story about the sick sister is the only human detail they have, and that is what she uses to explain the long hours. She's created a cover so simple, so mundane, that no one would ever look past it. It's brilliant." "Boss, we have bigger problems," Silas warned, his large hands gesturing toward a file on the desk, the ongoing Monte Carlo financial crisis. "The bank is calling again. And Bellini is quiet. Too quiet. Focusing on this girl is making us look soft. Your reputation is taking damage because you are ignoring the big fires to chase a small spark." This was the real moment of tension. Alessandro's obsession was now challenging the loyalty and logic of his own men. In their world, swift, brutal action was the expected response. His calculated pause was viewed as weakness. Alessandro picked up the file on the financial crisis, then tossed it aside. "The big fires are easy, Silas. They have paper trails, rules, and limits. But this Serafina is different. She is the first living challenge I have faced that I cannot trace, cannot bribe, and cannot scare. Bellini is protecting her, which means she is connected to a power that is trying to test me. If I defeat her, I defeat them all. She is not a spark, Silas. She is the signal flare for the enemy." Alessandro knew he needed to go deeper, beyond the obvious records. He sat down and reviewed the most heartbreaking detail about Serafina, the message he had sent about her sister, Clara, that first night. He looked at the time the message was sent and the time the blackout occurred. There was a direct, immediate correlation. Bellini had acted like an automated defense system, proving that Serafina wasn't just under protection. She was under surveillance by someone professional. He remembered her face when she delivered the chilling line about the 40 million euros, the sudden flash of confidence in her amber eyes. He went back to the CCTV footage, watching that moment again, but this time he focused on her mouth. She didn't smirk, but he saw the slightest, almost invisible tension in her lower lip, the kind of tension that showed she was holding back a flood of information, not just a burst of anger. She wanted to destroy me, Alessandro concluded, a flicker of dangerous admiration crossing his face. But she didn't use a gun. She used knowledge. She is smarter than everyone I have ever hired. His obsession was no longer about revenge for the insult. It was about possession of that intelligence. He didn't want to kill her anymore. He wanted to control her, to understand the depth of her secrets, and use that sharp mind for his own purposes. The idea of having someone so smart, so hidden, working for him was intoxicating. Silas, seeing the change in his boss's eyes, the shift from cold anger to intellectual hunger, shook his head internally. This girl was getting under Alessandro's skin in a way no rival organization ever could. She was disrupting the natural order of their business. "Boss," Silas interjected carefully. "I used our contacts at the Central Records Office. I couldn't find anything on Serafina Torres, but I ran the photo of her face through the system, cross-referencing against old, sealed police and government files, just to see if she had any past. And I found one small thing, sir. It was in a fire damage report from 3 years ago, linked to an incident involving a rival criminal network that mysteriously vanished, the Cassini Group, sir. The report had a photo of a young woman's passport." Silas hesitated, looking at Alessandro's rapt expression. "The name on that passport wasn't Serafina Torres, sir. It was Ilara Cassini. And the facial recognition match is 99%. Alessandro finally smiled, a thin, triumphant, and utterly predatory expression. The ghost was starting to take shape. He knew the name Cassini. They were the financial detectives who had vanished, rumored to be holding the most damaging files in the city. The ones who had nearly exposed his father years ago. "Ilara Cassini," Alessandro repeated, savoring the name. The daughter of a financial spy. Now the pieces fit. She wasn't guessing, Silas. She knew the 40 million because she has access to their ledger. She is not just a witness, she is an architect of revenge. Alessandro leaned back, his grey eyes alight with calculation. "This changes everything, Silas. Bellini is protecting a ghost from an old war. But now we know her real name, and we know who she truly is. That is leverage." He brought up the photo of the old passport on his screen, Ilara Cassini. Then, he focused on the file details. Serafina's real identity was confirmed, but beneath her name, Silas saw a note from the records office that had been accidentally uploaded with the file, a hidden digital marker that only the most powerful systems could read. Silas stared at the note, his jaw dropping. "Boss, look at the security clearance for this file. It was accessed and resealed last week. Not by us, and not by Bellini's company. It was accessed by a specific, high-level ID number. That number belongs to Silvio Falcone." Silvio Falcone, the terrifying, untouchable giant Serafina was truly targeting. Alessandro's head snapped up. Falcone wasn't just an enemy. He was the oldest, most powerful partner of the Moretti family. Falcone had been looking for Ilara Cassini, too. And if Falcone found out Alessandro was also chasing her, their alliance would crumble. Alessandro was now directly in the middle of a war between a ghost and a giant, and he held the key. The obsession had just become a dangerous, three-way entanglement where one wrong move meant death for them all. It was a regular Tuesday morning in San Bellagio, but for Alessandro Moretti, It was the day his pristine reputation cracked like thin ice. The rumor wasn't spread through whispers in dark alleys. It was delivered via every major financial news site in Europe. The headline was simple, but the content was toxic. Moretti charity exposed, a tax dodge built on lies. The story didn't expose violence or corruption, which Alessandro could handle. It exposed something far pettier and more embarrassing. For years, his family foundation, the Street Point Jude Children's Fund, was a complete sham. It existed solely to launder money and hide massive tax evasions. The report showed exact figures, dates, and even the coded phrases used in their internal ledgers. The technical term was digital collateral damage, but what it meant was that Alessandro had been caught with his pants down, looking cheap and foolish. Alessandro was in his office when Silas, the massive enforcer, slammed his phone down on the glass desk. Silas's face, usually set like concrete, was etched with panic. "Boss, the markets are reacting," Silas practically yelled, an unprecedented burst of panic from the calm giant. "The public image is destroyed. This isn't just about money, it's about the shame. That charity was supposed to make you look like a saint." Alessandro, with his sharp, chiseled features, remained unnervingly still. He wore a crisp white shirt, but he was gripping the edge of his mahogany desk so hard his knuckles were white against his olive skin. His cold grey eyes were fixed on the screen, reading the article that was meticulously dismantling years of image building. "The detail is too specific, Silas," Alessandro stated, his voice low and dangerous. "No one could have known about the St. Jude codes except me, my father, and the man who handles the money, Vincenzo. And Vincenzo is currently singing to the fishes." Silas shook his head. "But the financial detail, it's the same level of knowledge the waitress had that night. The 40 million, the Swiss account, and now this. All fingers point to her, boss. Only Ilara Cassini, with access to that legendary financial ledger her family created, could have done this." Alessandro stood up, grabbing his tailored jacket. The hunt was over. The fox had sprung the trap. "She didn't just leak it, Silas. She reacted. When we tried to trace her bank account the other night, her system must have struck back. She is not attacking me, she is defending herself with a financial nuclear weapon." He looked at Silas, his grey eyes burning with a desperate urgency. "I need her. Now. She is the only person who can help me stop the bleeding. Find where she is staying and bring her to me. Quietly. No one touches her but us. Bellini might be guarding her door, but he can't guard the whole city." It took Silas only an hour to find her new location. Serafina had moved out of the old quarter the moment Bellini showed up, knowing her apartment was compromised. She was now hiding above a quiet laundromat, paying cash daily. It was another perfectly mundane, unnoticeable hideout. They found her at a small, cheap diner late that afternoon. Serafina, dressed in a simple, oversized dark blue sweater and jeans, was quietly sipping a soda. Her dark, coiled hair was now pulled back in a severe, tight ponytail, emphasizing the sharp focus in her bright amber eyes. Silas and two other men moved in quickly, silently flanking her. Silas leaned down, his massive shadow enveloping her. "The boss wants a word, Ilara," Silas whispered, using her real name. "Do this the easy way. No noise." Serafina didn't jump. She didn't scream. She simply placed her empty glass down and looked up at Silas, a tiny, almost mocking smile touching her mocha-brown lips. "I figured he would. You don't ignore a 40 million euro embarrassment, do you?" They took her to a secure warehouse on the edge of the docks, a stark, concrete room with a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. Alessandro was already there, his arms crossed over his chest, his posture rigid with fury and control. As soon as the door closed, Alessandro walked toward her, his face a mask of cold intensity. "You enjoy this, don't you, Ilara Cassini?" He spat, using her real name like a weapon. "You enjoy watching me bleed in public. The St. Jude Foundation leak. The tax evasion. How did you get those files?" Serafina stood her ground, her chin tilted slightly, meeting his cold grey gaze without flinching. "I did not leak the file, Mr. Moretti," she corrected him calmly. But I am glad it happened. It proves my point. You are surrounded by weaknesses. Lies. Alessandro barked, taking a step closer. You are the only one with the Cassini ledger. You are the only one who knew about the Monte Carlo shift. You wanted revenge, and you took it. Serafina shook her head, a genuine look of weary frustration on her face. I didn't need to leak your petty tax dodge, Mr. Moretti. I am hunting a giant, remember? My ledger is reserved for Silvio Falcone. The leak you are worried about? That wasn't me taking revenge. That was my worm, my digital defense system, striking back when your people tried to hack into my fake account the other night. She paused, letting the shocking revelation sink in. You tried to ruin me financially, and my system saw your corporate signature and automatically retaliated, taking a massive slice of embarrassing data as collateral. I didn't choose the information, your carelessness chose it for me. Alessandro staggered back, his face flashing between rage and dawning comprehension. He realized the humiliation was his own fault, a boomerang effect from his initial, petty act of revenge. She was telling the truth, she was not trying to start a war with him, but his actions had forced her digital shield to fire a torpedo at his reputation. So, what is the point of this meeting? Serafina asked, her voice softening slightly, sensing his intellectual surrender. You can't stop the bleeding because you can't trust your own system. And soon, Falcone will see this leak, and he will see your moment of weakness. And when he moves, he will crush you, because he will think you were the one who leaked the data, trying to stir up trouble in his territories. Alessandro clenched his jaw. Serafina was right. Falcone wouldn't care about the truth. He would only care about the instability. He needed the leak stopped, and the only person who understood the digital weapon was the woman standing in front of him. You think I will trust you to help me now? Alessandro challenged, his grey eyes narrowed. You have no choice, Serafina countered simply. I can trace the secondary digital markers left by the leak and create a false narrative to stop the immediate flow of information. I can buy you a week of silence to deal with the inevitable Falcone reaction. But I need something first. Something that serves my purpose. Money? Alessandro asked, pulling out a sleek phone. Name your price. I'll give you double. Serafina gave him a look of profound disappointment. I don't need your tainted money, Mr. Moretti. I need your dignity. You humiliated me in front of your men, calling me clumsy and worthless. The only way I help you save your empire is if you first pay the price of my honor. She took a slow, deliberate breath, delivering the final blow. You will call an immediate, public press conference, right here on the docks. You will apologize, not to me, but to all the working people of San Bellagio, for your unforgivable arrogance and disrespect. You will say you lost your temper and treated a hard-working woman unjustly. And you will state that Serafina Torres is a woman of integrity and intelligence. The request hit Alessandro harder than any bullet. A public apology. To a waitress. His pride, his power, his entire persona was built on never showing weakness. This was worse than losing the 40 million euros. This was self-destruction. Alessandro stared at her, his olive skin tight over his chiseled face. The price was too high, yet the alternative, Silvio Falcone seeing this weakness, was death. His mind raced, calculating the political cost versus the fatal cost. He stood there for a long minute, the silence in the room punctuated only by the distant squawk of gulls. Serafina simply waited, her amber eyes steady, holding his fate in her gaze. Finally, Alessandro let out a slow, controlled breath. His shoulders slumped fractionally, the only sign of his crushing defeat. You are asking me to burn my reputation to save my life, Ilara, he whispered. You have won this round. The press conference is tomorrow at noon, Serafina stated, her voice utterly devoid of triumph. You apologize, and I save your empire. Fail to appear, and I let Falcone finish the job. Alessandro looked at the door. He was a prisoner in his own war. Fine, he said, his voice raw. But when this is over, you are mine. You will work for me, and you will teach me how to fight like you. But before she could answer, the door burst open. It wasn't Silas, it was a young man from Alessandro's security detail, his eyes wide with terror. "Boss, we have a problem. The servers, all of them, just went dark. And there's a new message flashing on every screen in the headquarters. It's a warning, sir. A direct message from Silvio Falcone himself. He knows about the leak, and he knows exactly where you are right now." Alessandro froze. Falcone had moved faster than they thought, proving that Serafina's week of silence was already over. They were exposed, trapped in the concrete room, and Falcone was watching. The fragile truce had shattered before it even began. For Alessandro Moretti, pride wasn't just a feeling, it was the entire foundation of his power. It was the icy armor that kept his enemies at bay. And now, he had to publicly strip that armor away, piece by painful piece, for the entire city to watch. Falcone's direct message, a digital threat that had instantly shut down Alessandro's entire security grid, had made the choice agonizingly simple. Apologize and live to fight, or cling to pride and die humiliated. Alessandro, with his olive skin tight over his chiseled jaw, chose survival. Less than 12 hours after the leak, Alessandro stood on a temporary stage on the waterfront, the shimmering blue waters of San Bellagio behind him. He was surrounded by reporters. He wore a simple, dark suit, no tie, which was meant to look casual but only made him look more exposed. Silas, the massive enforcer, stood stone-faced behind him, radiating tension. Alessandro stepped up to the microphone. The air was thick with the silent expectation of the crowd. He looked directly into the cameras, his cold grey eyes showing a flicker of inner turmoil. His voice, usually a sharp, cutting instrument, was low and measured. "Yesterday, I made a serious mistake," Alessandro began, every word tasting like ash in his mouth. "I lost my temper in a private setting. I directed harsh, unforgivable words toward a hard-working employee of the restaurant, Ms. Serafina Torres. I called her clumsy, and I used language that was beneath contempt." He paused, a deliberate, agonizing moment. This was the hardest sentence he'd ever uttered. "I want to offer my profound, public apology to Ms. Torres, and to every decent working person in this city. She is a woman of integrity and intelligence, and my actions were a moment of gross, unjustifiable arrogance. I was wrong. Completely and utterly wrong." The flashbulbs erupted. The sound was deafening. Alessandro felt the shame not as a single event, but as a slow, corrosive poison spreading through his system. This public bow, this admission of fault, was something his father would never have permitted. But it was the key that unlocked his future. Later, Serafina watched the clip on Alessandro's private security feed, tucked away in his secret headquarters. She had forced him into this apology, not out of petty revenge, but to prove to herself that even the most powerful men could be broken by moral pressure. Seeing his face, the raw humiliation in his cold grey eyes, she felt no triumph. Only a heavy sense of necessity. The war had officially begun, and they were now allies. The moment the apology went viral, spreading across social media faster than a wildfire, the reaction was immediate and split. For the general public, Alessandro was suddenly human. He was flawed, arrogant, yes, but capable of humility. The stock prices of his legitimate businesses, which had been dipping after the tax dodge leak, stabilized slightly. The city, which often feared him, now watched him with curious interest. But for his enemies, the apology was a flashing red light screaming weakness. They didn't see humility. They saw a man who had been forced to kneel by an invisible hand. And in their world, kneeling meant you deserved to be crushed. Within 2 hours, the first wave of attacks hit. It wasn't gunfire or car bombs, it was financial sabotage, the kind Serafina knew well. Alessandro's legitimate construction firm found itself suddenly facing crippling lawsuits over old, expired zoning permits. His import company's shipments were seized at the border, labeled as containing undisclosed materials. The attacks were swift, coordinated, and designed to freeze his cash flow. Alessandro was back in his high-tech office, his tailored jacket tossed over a chair. Serafina, who had been brought there right after the press conference, was hunched over his massive desk, her dark, coiled hair falling around her face as she worked on the glowing screens. The air crackled with a dangerous blend of professional tension and personal hostility. "Falcone is testing the boundaries," Serafina explained, pointing to a complex map of transactions. "He's not trying to kill you, he's trying to bankrupt you slowly and quietly. He's using bureaucracy, not bullets. He's confirming that Bellini's protection is only moral, not military. The apology cost you everything in terms of reputation in this room, Mr. Moretti." "I know what it cost me," Alessandro growled, running a frustrated hand through his hair. "And you know it was necessary. But you promised a week of silence. Falcone moved in 12 hours. "I bought you time to prepare," Serafina corrected him sharply, her bright amber eyes flashing up to meet his cold gaze. "Not time to relax. Falcone is fast. And he's using the exact kind of financial ghost system my family created. He has a mole, someone who knows the Cassini ledger almost as well as I do." They were forced into the most uncomfortable of alliances. Alessandro, the master of command, had to take strategic orders from the girl he had called trash. Serafina, the meticulous planner, had to rely on the terrifying resources of the man she despised. For the rest of the evening, they worked in a suffocating proximity. Serafina sat in the center, directing traffic, telling Silas where to send the cleanup crews, instructing Alessandro's lawyers on which documents to prioritize. She was the brain, and he was the fist. During a brief moment of quiet, Serafina scrolled through a file linked to the seized shipments. "He's not just freezing your assets," she observed. "He's moving them. He wants that specific shipment of rare earth minerals. They're not for construction, Alessandro. They're key components for high-level electronic encryption. He's upgrading his digital defenses." Alessandro walked up behind her, his breath warm on her neck. He smelled of expensive cologne and the faint metallic scent of stress. "How can you be so certain?" he asked, his voice low, the tension between them dangerously high. Serafina held her breath, refusing to move away. "Because those minerals were once ordered by my father," she stated, her voice quiet. "The Cassini syndicate used them to build the very digital ledger I now use. Falcone is trying to neutralize my only remaining weapon. He is hunting the ghost." Alessandro placed a hand flat on the desk beside her, trapping her slightly. His grey eyes were filled with a mix of desperate admiration and unsettling possessiveness. "You know everything, don't you, Ilara Cassini? You are a walking time bomb of secrets. And now, you are mine until this war is won." "I am not yours, Alessandro," Serafina retorted, finally turning to face him, the small movement bringing their faces inches apart. "I am your partner. And partners trust each other. You need to tell me who in your family or inner circle knew about the St. Jude charity codes besides your father and the missing Vincenzo." The question hit him like a physical blow. He stared at her, realizing he had just handed over his entire life to someone who had already humiliated him twice. But he had to trust her. Survival demanded it. "My mother," he whispered. She oversaw the Foundation's paperwork before she retired from the public eye. "Her name is Emilia Moretti." Serafina's amber eyes widened with a sudden, chilling realization. "Emilia Moretti. She lives in Geneva, near the Swiss account, doesn't she? And who was the only other person in the Obsidian that night besides Vincenzo, who wasn't actively speaking about the 40 million euros? Alessandro and Serafina spoke the name together, a terrifying answer that connected the betrayal to a far older, deeper loyalty, Mr. Bellini. Bellini wasn't protecting Serafina for her father. Bellini was protecting a secret for Emilia Moretti, the mother. The plot was twisting, linking the restaurant owner, the mother, and the entire Cassini secret in an elaborate, confusing net. Their tension, thick with mutual dependence and suspicion, was intensifying with every passing minute. This is the moment everything changes. Alessandro is forced to rely on the one woman he swore to destroy, and they've just uncovered a shocking trail of betrayal that leads right back to his own mother and the mysterious Bellini. If you are gripped by this unexpected alliance and desperate to know what Emilia Moretti and Bellini are hiding, hit that like button and let us know. Also, If you think Alessandro deserves this shame or if you're rooting for Serafina, comment with who you think is the real villain in this story so far. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the stunning truth in the next chapter. Serafina immediately brought up the electronic records of Emilia Moretti. As the financial data flooded the screen, Serafina realized Falcone's latest move was far more devastating than freezing shipments. It was a direct, targeted raid. "Falcone knows where my mother is," Alessandro gasped, his face draining of color. "He's going to use her to get to me." But Serafina shook her head slowly, pointing to an encrypted location marker buried deep within Emilia's file. "No, Alessandro. Falcone isn't going for your mother. He's going for a physical location that is registered to her name, a place she hasn't used in years. It's a closed-down financial archive office outside of Zurich." Serafina's finger trembled as she zoomed in on the archive's digital map. "That's not just an office," she whispered, her amber eyes wide with dread. "That's where the original, physical copies of the Cassini ledger were kept. That's the only backup. If Falcone gets the hard copy, he can decode my digital files and wipe out everything I have. And I think he's already there." A new, frantic alert flashed on the screen. "Access denied. System overload." The system had failed. Serafina realized her entire life's work, her only hope for revenge against Falcone, and the leverage she held over Alessandro, was about to be burned. Falcone had just won the round, and they were defenseless. In a world built on brute force, the only weapon that truly terrifies the powerful is the one they can't see. For Alessandro Moretti, that weapon was Serafina's brain. And right now, her brain was the only thing standing between him and total destruction. The system overload warning was a digital death sentence. Serafina, her dark, coiled hair pulled back tight, stared at the dark screen, the fear for the physical Cassini ledger archive in Zurich gripping her chest. She had spent 3 years protecting that knowledge, and now it was falling into the hands of Silvio Falcone. Alessandro was rigid with panic. "Get it back online. Now. If Falcone gets that hard copy, he can prove the tax fraud, he can prove the Monte Carlo story, and he can connect it all back to my father," he barked, his cold grey eyes flashing wildly. Serafina didn't even look at him. Her luminous mocha-brown skin was pale, but her bright amber eyes were focused, seeing patterns in the dead screen. "Stop yelling, Alessandro. Your anger is useless. The attack isn't digital anymore. It's a distraction. Falcone wants you focused on the screen while he moves his physical pieces." She grabbed a pen and a notepad, her hands moving with a lightning speed that was mesmerizing. "Look at the attack pattern before the shutdown. It was a classic Cassini trap. Multiple, synchronized probes hitting your servers. This wasn't to get data, it was to mask a movement." She sketched a quick, complex timeline, translating the digital attacks into physical locations on a map of San Bellagio. "Falcone is using the digital noise to cover 3 key operational targets. He thinks you're blinded by the Zurich fear, so he's hitting your most valuable assets now. He's not going for money, he's going for control." Alessandro leaned over her, his expensive cologne mixing with the smell of scorched metal in the office. "What targets?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble, finally recognizing that her unique intelligence was their only hope. Serafina pointed to 3 locations: the city's main power distribution hub, the central water reservoir, and the main data switching station for the entire coastal region. "He's not attacking your businesses. He's attacking the city's ability to function. If he can turn off the lights and the water, he owns the city, and your men will look weak and incapable. Falcone wins the war without firing a single shot." In that frantic moment, Serafina wasn't a waitress or a vengeful ghost. She was a general, using her deep understanding of financial networks to predict physical ambushes. And Alessandro, the cold-blooded Mafia boss, was taking orders from her, completely relying on her mind to save his empire. Serafina's prediction was terrifyingly accurate. While Alessandro's teams were still debating the Zurich threat, a coded message came across the emergency channel. A small, specialized team, Falcone's best demolition experts, was moving toward the city's main data switching station.
See?
Serafina asked, looking up at Alessandro. Zurich was bait. This is the kill. He wants to shut down all communication, all banking, all surveillance. He's going to turn the clock back 50 years, and then he's going to walk in and take over. Alessandro didn't hesitate. He looked at Silas, who was waiting for a command. Silas, divert all security teams to the switching station. Use minimal force. Just scare them off. No bodies. Not yet. I want Falcone to know we saw his move coming, Alessandro ordered. He paused, then looked at Serafina. And what about the other two targets? The power and the water. The men heading for the switching station are the most skilled, Serafina explained, quickly drawing a perimeter on the digital map. The rest of his resources are scattered and waiting for the signal, the blackout. We hit them before they get the command. You have men in the city's SAW maintenance department, don't you? Alessandro stared at her, stunned by her knowledge of his own city's infrastructure. How do you know that? My father built the financial trails that linked your family's construction deals to the city government, Serafina explained patiently. I know every secret access point your family controls. You send 3 teams through the SAW maintenance tunnels. They approach the power hub and the reservoir from below. They don't engage. They just block the access points. We stop the chaos before it starts. The speed of her analytical skill was mind-blowing. She took years of complex, encrypted financial data and translated it into real-time, life-saving strategy. Alessandro saw the truth. Without her, he would have been sitting in the dark, wondering where the enemy was while his entire foundation collapsed. He nodded, a sharp, decisive movement. Do it, Silas. Now. Follow her instructions to the letter. For the next few hours, Alessandro and Serafina worked as one terrifying unit. He executed the orders, the muscle, the resource, the authority. She provided the intelligence, the eyes, the map, the prediction. The small, localized ambushes were all neutralized before they could escalate. Falcone's coordinated strike failed completely. He had been outsmarted by a woman he didn't know existed. As the sun rose over San Bellagio, casting a golden light on the triumphant headquarters, Alessandro's victory was clear, but his priority had shifted entirely. He hadn't just defeated an enemy, he had secured his greatest asset. He turned to Serafina, who was closing her laptop, her face exhausted but satisfied. You saved my life, Ilara Cassini, he said, the words heavy with meaning. And you saved my entire operation. I owe you everything. You owe me nothing but the chance to use your resources to finish the job, Serafina replied, her amber eyes stern. Falcone is still a threat, and my ledger is still exposed. We are partners until the threat is neutralized, nothing more. Wrong, Alessandro countered, walking over to the phone and issuing a series of quick, firm commands. You are mine to protect. I don't leave my most valuable assets exposed. Within the hour, Serafina's quiet life as a hidden fugitive was over. Alessandro moved her out of the cramped, tiny apartment above the laundromat and into a beautiful, secure penthouse apartment near the harbor, far less exposed than his own fortress but with the same level of security. He assigned Silas and 2 other trustworthy, silent men to guard the doors 24 hours a day. He gave her a customized, encrypted phone that linked directly to his private line. This isn't payment, Alessandro told her, his cold grey eyes demanding obedience. This is security. You are protected because you are the only thing standing between Falcone and me. You stay inside. You continue to analyze his next move. No exceptions. Serafina knew this wasn't protection. It was possession. She was a captive bird in a gilded cage. But the cage was safe, and for the first time in 3 years, she knew Clara, who was also moved with her, was completely secure. The underworld of San Bellagio couldn't handle the visual evidence of this new arrangement. The gossip was immediate and sensational. The stories flew through the city's hidden networks, spreading faster than any newspaper headline. Did you hear? Alessandro Moretti, the marble man, has a new mistress. No, not a mistress. He's hired a witch. She casts spells on his enemies. She used to be a waitress. He publicly apologized for humiliating her, and now he has her locked up in a gilded cage, with Silas, the pit bull, guarding the door. Why? Why is the coldest mafia boss in Europe shielding a simple waitress? The rumor that gained the most traction was the one that fed Alessandro's reputation. She is his new weapon. She found a weakness, and he decided to conquer the source of his fear. He's obsessed with her power. This obsession, a strange mix of intellectual admiration and predatory desire, was undeniable. The spectacle of Alessandro bowing to a woman of no status, only to immediately elevate her to the status of a protected royal, was the most confusing move he had ever made. His men, including Silas, were unsettled, struggling to reconcile the arrogant, brutal boss with the man who now spent hours quietly watching a woman with mocha-brown skin and amber eyes work on a glowing screen. Alessandro was aware of the rumors. He didn't care. They served his purpose, making him look unpredictable and consolidating his control over Serafina. But for Serafina, the rumors felt like a trap tightening around her heart. She was using Alessandro to get to Falcone, but the lines were blurring. His presence, his respect, and his dangerous protection were weaving a web of tension that went beyond strategy. Late that night, tucked away in the safety of her new penthouse, Serafina received a silent, untraceable message on her personal, non-work phone, the one only Clara and Bellini knew the number to. The message was short: "He is going to use you to trap the mother. She knows where the original ledger is hidden. Be ready to move tomorrow night." Serafina's blood ran cold. The message wasn't from Bellini. The style was different, more aggressive. It was from Emilia Moretti, Alessandro's mother. The retired woman in Geneva was actively trying to communicate with Serafina, revealing that she was the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. Before Serafina could react, the door to the penthouse's living room opened quietly. Alessandro stood there, dressed only in dark pants, his chiseled torso bare. He looked intense, dangerous, and deeply conflicted. He had been watching her on the internal security feed. "I need to know everything you are hiding about my mother, Ilara," he whispered, walking slowly into the room. "You know she's the key to this war. Tell me now, or this partnership ends." Just as Serafina opened her mouth to reveal the truth, the main power to the apartment, and the surrounding block, suddenly went dark. It wasn't Falcone style, it was quiet, surgical, and effective. The same kind of blackout that had saved her life the night of the public insult. Only this time, Serafina knew who was behind it. It was Mr. Bellini, the mysterious owner of the Obsidian. A harsh voice, amplified through a hidden speaker system in the walls, cut through the sudden silence. It was Bellini's voice, not kind and tired, but stern and commanding. "Alessandro Moretti, you have crossed the line," the voice boomed, chilling them both to the bone. "Ilara Cassini is not your weapon. You will not touch your mother, and you will not use the girl. If you want a war, you can have one, but it will be with me. I am here to take Ilara, and you are going to let her walk out that door." Alessandro froze, his cold grey eyes blazing into the darkness. He had finally found the invisible hand protecting Serafina, and it was Bellini. But the timing was lethal, trapping Alessandro between the woman he needed to control and the mysterious power he could not defeat. In the end, it was never about the 40 million euros, the tax evasion, or the power distribution hub. It was always about one man's need to control the only person who could outsmart him. And when control failed, everything, his pride, his power, and his cold heart, came crashing down. The air in the secure penthouse wasn't just dark, it was choked with the amplified voice of Bellini, threatening war, demanding Serafina's surrender. Alessandro, caught half-naked and furious, moved instantly, not towards the door, but towards Serafina, shielding her with his body. "Bellini!" Alessandro roared into the darkness. "You want her? You'll have to take me first. Get off my channel." Serafina felt the hard tension in Alessandro's body pressed against hers, a terrifying, confusing mix of protection and possession. She pushed him back, her voice urgent. It's a distraction. Bellini isn't here for me, he's giving Falcone cover. They are moving on Zurich. You have to go. Alessandro hesitated, his grey eyes blazing in the faint light filtering from the harbour. He looked at Serafina, then back at the door, trying to balance two equally deadly threats. Silas. He barked into his encrypted phone. Where are you? Secure this floor. Bellini is here. The line was silent. Then, after a terrible beat of silence, a calm, low voice cut through the chaos, not on the speaker system, but right behind them. Silas isn't coming, boss. He's busy packing. Alessandro spun around. Standing just inside the darkened hallway, holding a briefcase, was Silas. The massive enforcer, Alessandro's shadow, his rock, his closest lieutenant, was wearing a crisp, expensive suit, not his usual security uniform. And he was alone. In that moment, the true, final betrayal hit Alessandro harder than any bullet. Silas, Alessandro whispered, his voice dangerously flat. What are you doing? Silas, his massive frame utterly composed, didn't flinch. I'm finishing the job, Alessandro. The job I should have finished 3 years ago. The job your mother hired me to do. The revelation slammed into Alessandro, eclipsing Bellini's threat and Falcone's movements. His mother. The puzzle pieces snapped into a horrifying picture. Bellini wasn't protecting Serafina for her father, he was protecting her for Emilia Moretti, Alessandro's own mother, who was secretly working with Bellini to manage the family's oldest secrets. You knew about her, Alessandro accused Silas, pointing a shaking finger at Serafina. You knew who Ilara Cassini was the whole time. Silas nodded, his eyes devoid of emotion. Of course, I knew. She is the daughter of the woman who nearly destroyed your father 20 years ago. The Cassini syndicate didn't just track financial crimes, Alessandro. They specialized in exposure. They were targeting your family's oldest shipping routes, the ones that funded the entire network. If your father hadn't eliminated them, the Moretti name would be dust right now. Alessandro looked at Serafina, his blood turning to ice. You targeted my family. You came here not for Falcone, but for me. Serafina stepped out from behind him, her face a mixture of regret and cold calculation. Falcone killed my family. But you are the son of the man who crippled them first. Your family is collateral, Alessandro. I needed your resources, your location, and your arrogance to get close to Falcone. Every insult, every move, every apology, it was all leverage. Silas took a deliberate step forward. The final truth, Alessandro. Ilara Cassini didn't just have the financial files on your family. She had the codes. She created the Trojan horse that nearly sank your father's primary shipping line. She wasn't just a part of the syndicate. She was the architect of the attack that nearly ruined you all. And when you apologized in front of the world, she was laughing at you. Alessandro's breath hitched. He wasn't just played, he was systematically and brilliantly humiliated by the one person he had allowed into his world, the one person he had bowed to. He had exposed his weakness, his shame, and his obsession for the benefit of his most dangerous enemy. His coldness snapped. His carefully constructed marble mask shattered, replaced by raw, painful fury. You used me. You risked my sister's life and made me a laughingstock, all for a pathetic ghost war. The only pathetic thing is your weakness, Serafina countered, her voice sharp and clinical. I proved you would sacrifice your pride for your life. And you did. You fell for the most obvious truth, a pretty face with a sad story. I needed your protection to survive Falcone, and you gave it to me out of your own self-centered curiosity. The lights flickered back on momentarily, catching the look of devastation on Alessandro's face. His chiseled features were contorted, his grey eyes wide with shock and pain. The obsession, the strange, possessive admiration he had felt for her intelligence, curdled into self-loathing. I put my life in your hands, he choked out, his voice hoarse. I trusted your mind over my own men. I let you into my home. I protected your sister. Serafina reached for the small, hidden compartment in the wall. And for that, I am grateful. You protected Clara. I never forgot that. But trust is earned, Alessandro. And you are Moretti. You never deserved my trust. She pulled out her original laptop, the powerful machine hidden in the walls of the penthouse. Bellini's blackout was a distraction for this. Not to save me from you, but to save me from Silas, who was about to move against me, or Falcone, who is now securing the ledger in Zurich. Silas moved, drawing a quiet, suppressed weapon from inside his briefcase. You're not going anywhere, Ilara. Your protection detail is neutralized, and Bellini is isolated. You belong to Emilia now. Wrong, Serafina said, typing rapidly on the laptop. I belong to no one. Suddenly, the lights went out again, and this time, the darkness was absolute. A high-pitched, metallic shriek filled the room, the sound of every security feed, every alarm, and every encrypted channel Alessandro owned failing simultaneously. Serafina had just executed a digital scorched earth policy. Alessandro lunged forward, not for her, but for Silas, his mind consumed by the immediate, devastating betrayal. Traitor! A brief, violent scuffle erupted in the darkness. Alessandro, driven by pure adrenaline and rage, fought with brutal efficiency, but Silas was bigger, stronger, and prepared. The sounds of breaking glass and heavy impacts echoed through the luxurious penthouse. But Serafina was gone. She didn't stay to watch the men fight. She used the violent chaos and the total digital blindness she had created as her escape route. She moved silently toward the apartment's emergency service stairwell, her laptop tucked into a small backpack, leaving the two warring men to sort out the wreckage of his empire. When the lights flickered back on a few minutes later, restored by Bellini's retreating interference, Alessandro was alone. Silas was unconscious on the floor, bleeding from a deep head wound. Serafina's hiding place was empty, the service door ajar. Alessandro, bruised, bleeding, and trembling not from the fight but from the personal wound, walked slowly to the broken window overlooking the glittering lights of San Bellagio. The rumors, the whispers that he was obsessed, that he was weak, were all true. She had played him like a simple piano, and he had loved the music. He looked at the unconscious Silas, then out at the city. He didn't issue an order for a manhunt, he issued a personal vow. You think you can play the ghost, Ilara Cassini? Alessandro whispered into the night, his voice raw with a terrifying mixture of defeat and renewed hunger. You took my pride, my money, and my trust. But you didn't take my future. You gave me a reason to live, and a game I need to win. You are the only person who understands the real meaning of power, and I will find you. And when I do, I will break you or I will possess you, but either way, you will be mine. He turned and walked toward the digital wreckage of his office. He was ruined, exposed, and hunted by Falcone and Bellini. But he was also completely free of his own rigid rules, and now he had a singular, deadly obsession. The woman who had walked away from the most powerful man in Europe and left him a broken, heartbroken shell. When Alessandro Moretti hit the floor, it wasn't the pain from Silas's blow that shook him. It was the shock of total, devastating betrayal. But Alessandro wasn't just a powerful man. He was an analytic machine. Even bruised and bleeding, he knew one truth: Ilara Cassini never leaves a clean trail. Alessandro slowly pushed himself up from the penthouse floor, ignoring the silent, unconscious body of Silas. The room was a wreck of broken glass and shattered security systems. He walked over to the desk, his eyes scanning the remnants of the digital battlefield Ilara had created. She had executed a digital scorched earth protocol, wiping out nearly everything. But she was exhausted, and she was rushed. Alessandro knew that in every genius's work, there is a signature flaw. He ignored the main servers and focused on the smallest, most insignificant connection point, a backup router that linked the penthouse's thermostat to the smart home system. He ripped the router from the wall and quickly plugged it into a heavily armored forensic device. The device screamed a warning: the file system was corrupted, fragmented, and designed to self-destruct. But Alessandro worked faster than the corruption. He wasn't looking for financial data, he was looking for a ghost of a personal file, something Ilara had forgotten to purge. After 10 agonizing minutes, a single, deep-level communications log appeared on the small screen. It was an encrypted chat from 3 years ago, archived in the router's cached memory. The usernames were coded, but the conversation was chillingly personal. Alessandro read the chat, his blood running cold. It was a conversation between Architect E, Ilara, and Shadow C, Clara. The conversation wasn't about a sister's fever, it was about a strategy. The conversation confirmed the true story of the Cassini syndicate's fall. But the biggest revelation wasn't the attack itself. It was the identity of the attacker. Alessandro's grey eyes widened in a profound, gut-wrenching realization as he read the messages. The Trojan horse is complete, the message from Shadow C read. The Moretti shipping routes will collapse by morning. Father's work is done. Stop. The risk is too high. Architect E, Ilara, had replied frantically. We are not ready for a full war with Falcone. If we expose Moretti now, Falcone will see the opening and eliminate us all. You must stop the launch. It's launched, Shadow C replied, cold and final. I used your encryption credentials, Ilara. They'll trace it back to you. I will draw their fire. You must survive and keep the ledger safe. I need you to build the new network. The world tilted for Alessandro. The woman he had relentlessly hunted for 3 days, the one he had called clumsy, forced to apologize, and trapped in his high-rise, was the only person trying to save his empire. Alessandro slammed his fist onto the desk, the pain eclipsed by his self-loathing. The sick sister Clara wasn't sick at all. She was Ilara's older sister, the true architect of the original attack against the Moretti family, and she had deliberately used Ilara's identity to frame her and protect the ledger. The sick sister story was a perfectly constructed, heartbreaking lie, not to gain pity, but to explain Ilara's location and isolation. Ilara was never the attacker, she was the scapegoat, the protector, and the one who had tried to warn her sister that the ambush would trigger Falcone's wrath. Alessandro looked at the chaos in his office, his chest heaving. He thought of the public apology, the humiliation that had nearly cost him his life. He had forced the innocent party to kneel while protecting the guilty one. He had threatened the protector's sister, the sister who was alive and working for his enemies. The anger he had felt toward Ilara evaporated, replaced by a consuming wave of regret. His own obsession, his pride, and his inability to look beyond the immediate insult had blinded him to the obvious truth. Ilara was always trying to stop the syndicate her sister had created, not rebuild it. He worked quickly, his fingers flying across the keyboard, tracing the last known activity of Shadow C. He needed to know if Clara Cassini was still a threat. The answer came back instantly, confirming his worst fear. Clara Cassini was not only alive, but she was actively operating a sophisticated digital network. And her recent activity logs showed communication lines that linked directly to Bellini's private security channels and, more chillingly, to Falcone's primary encrypted relay. Clara Cassini was the mole. She was the one who had provided Falcone with the exact details of the St. Jude charity, the same details Ilara's digital worm had struck as collateral damage. The entire war, the threats, the leaks, the siege, was orchestrated by Ilara's own sister, who was now working under the protection of Alessandro's mother, Emilia Moretti, and Bellini. Bellini wasn't protecting Ilara for her father, he was protecting her because Emilia Moretti needed the Cassini ledger to be kept safe, and she knew Ilara was the only one who had the integrity to protect it from Falcone. Alessandro realized the truth. Ilara wasn't trying to strike him. She was trying to get close to him to use his resources against Falcone, while simultaneously protecting him from the resurgence of her own destructive sister. He had nearly killed the one person in San Bellagio capable of saving his life. Alessandro's breathing was shallow and ragged. He looked at the wreckage of his life. He felt the sting of the physical fight with Silas, but the deeper wound was the emotional devastation. He had never been so wrong about anyone. His cold, calculating heart felt a terrifying new emotion, need. He saw the full picture. Clara Cassini was Falcone's new, secret weapon, and Ilara was the only one with the intelligence to stop her. And now, Ilara was gone, running into the night, hunted by everyone because of his actions. Alessandro grabbed a clean shirt and pulled it over his bruised torso. He moved with a focused energy, a new purpose blazing in his grey eyes. This wasn't about revenge against Ilara, it was about redemption and a brutal new war against his true enemies: Falcone, Emilia, Bellini, and the lethal ghost of Clara Cassini. He issued orders to the remnants of his security teams: forget Bellini. Forget Falcone. You are searching for one person: Ilara Cassini. She is not a threat, she is a target. If anyone touches her, they answer to me. He looked at the empty cityscape, the place where Ilara had vanished. He felt the desperate hope of finding her, the need to apologize for the humiliation he had forced upon her, and the fierce urgency to protect her from the sister who had betrayed her. Alessandro found one last encrypted communication on the corrupted drive. It was a recent message, sent only hours ago by Clara Cassini, detailing her next move now that Ilara was out of the picture. The message was short and chilling: the ledger is safe. Now that Ilara has served her purpose, I have located the real weak point: the sister's medical records. Falcone needs leverage. The exchange is set for midnight at the old shipyard. Tell Emilia to prepare the payment. Alessandro stared at the screen. Clara was still alive, and the initial Six Sister story was still true in one devastating way. Clara's life-saving medical records, the one thing Ilara cared about more than the ledger, were the new target. Falcone and Clara were using the medical information as a final, cruel piece of leverage. Ilara had been forced to leave to protect her life, but now, the only thing she truly loved was at risk. Alessandro knew exactly where Ilara would go. She would walk straight into the trap to save the one person who had betrayed her. He had a few hours to find Ilara Cassini and stop her from sacrificing herself to the monster her own sister had created. The old shipyard was silent, the air thick with the smell of brine and rust. It was midnight, the hour of the deal. But tonight, the only currency being exchanged was betrayal and blood. Silvio Falcone stood under the skeletal shadow of a massive crane, his form imposing and utterly still. Beside him was Clara Cassini, Ilara's older sister, dressed in a sleek black suit, a laptop open on a rusty barrel. Her expression was one of cold, victorious command. She held a single, encrypted drive, the final medical records that would lure Ilara into the trap. Your sister is predictable, Clara. Falcone's voice was like grinding steel. She cares more about this pathetic medical history than her entire life's work. Send the message. Clara's lips curved into a cruel smile. She will be here in minutes, Silvio. And once she's neutralized, the full digital ledger is ours. Alessandro Moretti will be a distant memory. Before Clara could press the key, a single black sedan, Alessandro's, screeched to a halt at the edge of the dock. Alessandro emerged, bruised, exhausted, but radiating a dangerous new resolve. He was alone, his hands empty, a deliberate move to show he hadn't come for a fight. Silvio, Alessandro's voice cut through the silence. We have a problem. You're dealing with the wrong Moretti, and the wrong Cassini. But Alessandro's cold grey eyes weren't fixed on Falcone. They were fixed on a small figure moving silently across the deserted docks, her dark hair catching the harbour light. Ilara Cassini had walked straight into the trap. She wasn't carrying a weapon. She was carrying the laptop containing the entirety of the digital war she had waged for 3 years. Ilara! Stop! Alessandro roared, but she kept walking toward her sister, her amber eyes burning with single-minded focus. She was walking to her death to retrieve the one thing Clara had left of their family. Falcone laughed, a dry, rasping sound. The hero arrives. Look at you, Moretti. Bruised, alone, and protecting the woman who humiliated you in front of the world. You're ruined. The choice is simple: kill the traitor, Clara, and I will leave you enough to rebuild. Or protect the fool, Ilara, and I will use the full power of the Cassini ledger, which Clara controls, to wipe your name off the face of the earth by sunrise. Alessandro looked at the two sisters. Clara, the betrayer, poised and lethal, holding the power to ruin him. Ilara, the protector, vulnerable and desperate, walking towards a certain end. Clara spoke, her voice laced with venom for her sister. It was never about Falcone, Ilara. It was about cleaning up the mess you made 3 years ago. You were too soft. You are the only obstacle left. Just give me the ledger, and I'll give you the records. Ilara stopped 10 feet from the barrel, her eyes filled with a weary sorrow for the sister she had lost. The ledger is safe, Clara. The records are worth nothing. They were digital backups. You walked into this trap, not me. Falcone stepped forward, drawing a silenced pistol and aiming it directly at Ilara's head. The game is over, Moretti. Choose. Your empire, or the girl. Alessandro closed his eyes for a brief, agonizing second. He saw the cold logic of 3 generations of Moretti power. Eliminate the threat. He opened his eyes, now filled with a strange, fierce clarity. The clarity of a man who had finally chosen integrity over legacy. He looked at Falcone. You still don't understand, Silvio, Alessandro said, his voice low, steady, and utterly final. I am Alessandro Moretti. I don't follow rules. And I am done paying the price of my own arrogance. I choose the girl. You can keep the empire. It wasn't worth the shame. Alessandro took a step toward Ilara, placing himself between her and Falcone's pistol. I won't let you hurt her, Silvio. Do what you have to do. Falcone's face twisted in fury. You fool. You just signed your own death warrant. He raised the pistol higher, preparing to fire at Alessandro. Just as Falcone prepared to pull the trigger, Ilara moved. Not to run, but to slam her hand down onto the rusty barrel where Clara's laptop sat. She activated a single, tiny switch she had rigged beneath the metal. Wrong choice, Silvio, Ilara said, her eyes never leaving his. Alessandro didn't choose to sacrifice his life for me. He chose to save the only person who could destroy yours. And he already paid the price. Suddenly, a violent burst of sound and light erupted, not from a gun, but from Clara's laptop. The screen flashed bright white, and a high-pitched digital siren wailed, louder than the silence of the docks. What did you do? Clara screamed, lunging for her computer. I executed the final code, Ilara stated, her voice trembling with emotional exhaustion, but unwavering. The one you designed, Clara. The one that required a public signature of extreme corporate instability to authenticate a final, irreversible data purge. You needed Alessandro to publicly lose control to trigger it. Ilara turned to Alessandro, the profound love and exhaustion in her amber eyes hitting him like a physical blow. I didn't disappear to escape you, Alessandro. I disappeared so the viral video of your apology, your moment of shame, could be authenticated as the key to my code. Your humility was the final encryption layer. You didn't just apologize to save your life, you apologized to authenticate the destruction of the old syndicate. As the siren blared, a final message flashed across Clara's screen. Silvio Falcone, all offshore assets purged. Cassiopeia network destroyed. Justice executed. Falcone staggered back, his pistol dropping to the ground with a soft clang. His empire, the giant Ilara had been hunting for years, had just been digitally vaporized. The war was over. Clara had built the ultimate financial weapon, and Ilara had used Alessandro's shame to turn it against the monster who had killed their family. Clara collapsed, defeated and weeping, her ambition reduced to ashes. Falcone, staring at the screen, fell to his knees in silent, utter defeat. The fight was gone. Justice had won. Alessandro didn't look at either of them. He walked past the fallen pistol, past the weeping Clara, and stopped in front of Ilara. He saw the genuine sorrow, the exhaustion, and the immense burden she had carried for 3 years. The records, were they real? Alessandro asked, his voice raw, his eyes searching hers. No, Ilara admitted, shaking her head. They were digital smoke. Clara didn't know I moved the real ones a year ago. It was a bluff to lure her out, and to ensure you would have a reason to show up. Alessandro looked at the wreckage of his pride, the public apology, the humiliation. He had chosen her, even when he believed she was a liar and a traitor, and now he understood why. She had fought for justice with intelligence, not violence, and that was the power he truly needed. He reached out and gently touched her bruised cheek, the same cheek he had once threatened to strike. "I owe you a real apology, Ilara Cassini. Not the public one you forced, but the private one you deserve. I was blind, arrogant, and I almost cost you everything. Forgive me." Ilara leaned into his touch, her amber eyes reflecting his sincerity. "You chose me, Alessandro. When Falcone gave you the choice, you chose the woman who exposed your shame over your entire empire. That is the greatest redemption I could have asked for." He pulled her into a fierce, protective embrace, a man who had finally shed his icy exterior. He hadn't just saved his life, he had saved his soul. He had traded his empire for a chance at redemption, and in doing so, he had gained the greatest weapon of all, a partner with unwavering integrity. The Mafia boss, once the coldest man in Europe, held the woman who had brought him to his knees, not in anger, but in a desperate, hard-earned love. The war was over, the syndicate was destroyed, and a new, powerful alliance, built on betrayal, strategy, and respect, had just begun.